So I just wanted to quickly demo some control of the MS-20 Mini via the Electro Harmonix 8-step. The 8-step is basically a CV device. It can output CV. You can either have it working totally standalone without MIDI, in which case you set the rate via this knob here. You dial in your CV rates over 8-step pattern here. You can control various components via an expression pedal, which I don't have. You can also tap tempo if you're running it not synced to MIDI, and you would also need to hit play again if you weren't starting off via MIDI, and you can reset the pattern back to 0. But I do actually have it connected to MIDI, and I've got that hooked up to Logic over here, which is just running a little loop. We're actually running at 128 BPM, and I've got the clock being sent through to the 8-step. On the 8-step here you can see what we've got tap divide, and that will actually allow us to set the divider based on the clock. So we can either have it running at various different speeds. I'm just going to leave it at the fastest one for the time being. You can see over here, probably can't read what it says because of the very bright LEDs. But basically we've got this knob that controls several different functions, and I'll explain a bit more about them once I actually show it making a sound. So probably the first thing to do is if we take the CV output, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it into some of the MS-20 parts which are normally only controlled by the internal LFO. One of those is the low pass filter up here, so I'm going to take my CV, plug that into low pass, and I'm also going to turn up the volume on the MS-20 just so we can actually hear something. Now normally if you wanted to control the cutoff frequency for the low pass, what you'd do is you'd dial in MG-TX here, and then you turn up the LFO. Okay, but what you could also do is use EG2X, and what that will do is it will take the source from the CV in, so we can dial that up, and that's actually now playing my pattern that I'm playing here. You can actually see the pattern going backwards and forwards. One of the things that you can do with the 8-step is you can either have it running forwards, reverse, or bounce, which gives me this nice kind of wavy pattern, and you can do it random, but let's just leave it on bounce for the time being. You can also adjust the number of steps, so if I put it down to 4 it will just... Okay. You can adjust the depth, which is essentially sort of how much CV is sent out, depending on what we've got here. So if we've got it to 9, that's the most extreme setting. It's going to be changing the CV value up and down much more than if we've got it set to 1 or whatever. So I'll leave that at 9. And then we've got glide, and glide essentially sort of sets the smoothness between each step. So set at 0, there is no glide between each of our 8 steps, and so it's a much more distinct noise. You can increase the glide, and it sort of fills in the gaps in between the steps to create a much smoother glide. So you're actually getting a glide that wouldn't normally come from 8 steps once you've got it set all the way up to the top. On the MS-20 you can also control the high pass filter in exactly the same way, and you can also control the frequency. So typically with frequency modulation you would dial up the MG-TX, and then again you'd use the internal LFO to modulate the frequency. Similarly we can use EG, Ext, and then we can control the modulation based on external CV. But I think my favourite is probably controlling the low pass filter and creating some really nice movement.